I never thought I'd be left out in the cold by my own daughter. I never imagined that the man she married would strip away every last bit of my dignity right when I was at my lowest, and that she'd just let him. But what they didn't know was that life still had one last card for me to play, and when I played it, everything changed. Get ready, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. Comment below where you're watching from, and please don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. My name is Susan. I'm 58 years old, and until not long ago, I truly believed in something called unconditional love, especially when it came to family. I built my whole life around my husband and our daughter Lauren. Every meal I cooked, every holiday I planned, every single dollar I saved, it was all for them. When my husband passed from cancer last year, it felt like the floor just vanished beneath me. But I told myself I still had Lauren, I still had my daughter. I sold the house we'd built from scratch in Cedar Park, just north of Austin. Too many memories, too many nights waking up expecting to hear his voice calling from the kitchen. Lauren and her husband Blake offered me a place to stay. Well, at least Lauren did. Blake barely looked up from his phone when I moved in. I tried so hard not to make waves. I kept to my tiny room in the back, cooked, cleaned, offered to run errands, just trying to be helpful, trying to stay out of the way. But Blake, he had this way of making me feel unwanted. His eyes always carried that irritation, like I was a splinter under his skin. It started with the small things. He'd roll his eyes if I asked a question, change the TV when I was right in the middle of a show. Once I heard him mutter under his breath, "freeloader," as he passed me in the hall. I tried to convince myself I misheard, but deep down I knew I hadn't. And Lauren, she said nothing. I'd look to her for backup, for just one word, anything, but she always played it down. "He's stressed," she'd say. "Work's been rough." I swallowed the shame and stayed quiet. That's what mothers do, right? But that night, it shattered me. We were at the dinner table. I'd made chicken pot pie, his favorite. Lauren was scrolling on her phone, Blake sipping his beer like always. The silence was so heavy. Then out of nowhere, Blake looked up and said, "You know, maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary." "We're not a charity." Lauren froze. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He smirked and said, "I mean, how long is this supposed to go on? You're not working, you're not contributing, we've got bills. We didn't sign up for extra mouths to feed." My breath caught, my heart was pounding. I turned to Lauren, desperate. Lauren, she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe it's best," she mumbled, "if you find something more stable for everyone's sake." Everyone's sake. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just stood up, walked to my room, packed my things. 2 suitcases, that's all I had left of my life. I didn't even cry while I packed. The tears came later when I stood outside their building, the wind biting through my coat, and realized I had nowhere to go. Lauren didn't walk me out. Blake didn't even pretend. I sat on the curb for an hour, phone battery dead, heart completely empty. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be erased. That night, I checked into a motel, the kind where the wallpaper peels and the vending machine eats your change. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything could turn so cold, wondering what I had done to deserve this kind of abandonment. The next morning, I sent Lauren a message. "I understand, I love you always." No reply. The next week, another message, then another. Birthdays, little updates, silence. 3 months passed. Each day felt longer than the last. I tried applying for jobs, anything, but no one wanted to hire a grieving widow in her late 50s with no recent work history. I considered cleaning houses, babysitting, but my body didn't move the way it used to. The loneliness, it was suffocating, and worse than that, the shame. I had given everything to that girl. How could she turn her back so easily? One evening, I was going through a box of old family keepsakes, just trying to feel close to something, anything, and I found it. My mother's old diary. I hadn't read it in years, maybe never, but something pulled me to it. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, turned the pages, and that's when I found it. A name, a truth, a secret that changed everything. My hands shook, my heart raced, because suddenly I wasn't just the mother who got kicked out. I was someone else entirely, and for the first time in months, I smiled. They took everything from me, but they had no idea what was coming. The days blurred into each other after that, like gray watercolors bleeding on wet canvas. The motel room smelled of stale air and distant cigarettes. The vending machine hum became my lullaby of defeat. I stayed quiet. I didn't cry every night, but when I did, it was the quiet kind, the kind that trembles through your whole body, but you keep it inside because no one's coming to comfort you. I texted Lauren again, a simple message. I'm okay, just wanted to know how you are. No reply. 2 weeks later, just a heart emoji. Nothing. I told myself she was busy, she'd come around, Blake must be twisting things. But as the weeks rolled on, that hope started to rot inside me. My money was thinning. I tried part-time work, grocery stores, front desks, a diner down by the highway, but I was either overqualified or not a good fit, polite code for too old, too tired. One night I sat on the floor, sorting through the only box I'd brought that wasn't clothes. Old photos, a few letters, and tucked at the very bottom, that small leather-bound diary. I lit the old lamp, opened the first page. Her handwriting, the same neat loops from the notes she used to slip into my lunchbox when I was a kid. At first it was ordinary, weather, church, complaints about grocery prices. Then I got to the entry dated June. He came again today, said he wished things were different, that he wished I could be his wife. But he has a family, a business, a name to protect. Susan will never know, she must never know. I just pray one day she understands how much I loved her, even if she was born out of mistake and desire. I read it twice, then again, my breath caught in my chest. She must never know. I flipped further. Entry after entry, hints, memories, secret meetings, small cash payments she tried to refuse but needed desperately. She never named him fully, only initials, RPD. Then another entry, February. He said he'd made arrangements that if anything ever happened to him, he'd ensure Susan had something, a part of what he built. It won't be official, too dangerous, but he promised a trust, a letter. His lawyer, Mr. Morrison, would know. It hit me like a punch to the stomach. It took 2 days searching on the motel's shared computer, but I found him. Edward Morrison, retired estate lawyer, still listed in Dallas. My hands trembled too much to call, so I sent a letter handwritten explaining who I was, who my mother was, begging for a conversation. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. His voice cracked when I mentioned my mother's name. I always wondered if you'd reach out someday, he said. There's something you need to see. I took the Greyhound to Dallas the next morning, suitcase half-packed just in case. But when I walked into that quiet office filled with old books and silence, I knew it was real. He handed me a sealed envelope, yellowed, fragile. From Richard Paul Donovan, founder of Donovan Energy, one of the biggest oil firms in Central Texas. The man I'd seen in newspaper clippings my whole life, the man with the perfect family, the legacy. The letter was addressed to my daughter Susan Lynn. I couldn't read it all at once. I cried before the second paragraph. He admitted everything, the affair, the regret, the silent love, and then the promise. In the event of my death, I have ensured a portion of my personal assets, untraceable, are delivered to you via Mr. Morrison. You are my blood, and though I was too much a coward to claim you in life, I claim you now in death. Mr. Morrison slid a folder across the table. Bank accounts, investments, ownership papers, titles. A little over $1 million, I whispered. This is real, he nodded. It's yours, always was. My heart thundered, not because of the money, but because for the first time in my life I felt chosen, seen. I didn't scream, didn't laugh, didn't break down. I just sat there, quiet, letting the truth wash over me like long-awaited rain. That night in the motel, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, but this time with a smile creeping onto my face. They thought they'd discarded me. They thought I was done, but they had no idea I wasn't broken. I was just getting started. I didn't go back to Austin right away. Something inside me had shifted permanently. I wasn't just Susan, the forgotten mother, anymore. I was someone new, someone who'd been lied to her entire life and finally saw the truth. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't drowning in shame. I was breathing clarity. I stayed in Dallas a few more days, walking neighborhoods, sipping coffee in silence, watching people live their lives. And for the first time, I didn't envy them. I studied them, wondered who else wore smiles that masked heartache, who else had been betrayed, who else had clawed their way back from being invisible. Edward Morrison didn't just give me the inheritance, he gave me time. Time to process, to understand what I now held. It wasn't just wealth, it was power. And grief has a way of becoming fuel when you've been humiliated enough. When I returned to Austin, I didn't go back to the motel. I booked a short-term rental downtown just off South Congress. Clean, modern, quiet. the kind of place Lauren and Blake would never imagine me affording. I started dressing differently, more polished, deliberate, not flashy, just confident. The kind of confidence that opens doors. I watched YouTube videos on investing, real estate contracts. I learned the language of business, not to build an empire, but to protect myself. I would never be powerless again. That's when I found it, buried on a real estate auction site. A small apartment building in East Austin, a little rundown but structurally sound. The exact complex where Lauren and Blake lived. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. Distressed property owner defaulting on taxes, auction in 2 weeks. I didn't hesitate. With Mr. Morrison's help, I created an LLC, anonymous shell company, transferred funds, placed the bid. I wasn't planning revenge, not exactly, but I was taking control of the one place they thought they ruled. The auction came and went. I won quietly, legally, completely under the radar. And just like that, I owned the building where they lived, where they kicked me out with 2 suitcases, where they humiliated me in my lowest moment. I sat at my desk looking at the deed and whispered, "Let's see how Blake likes paying rent to a mouth he couldn't feed." A month later, the notification letters went out to all tenants. Rents reassessed, lease terms reviewed. And for Lauren and Blake, the new amount was triple, not double, triple market value plus overdue fees. He must have exploded. I didn't need to see it, I could feel the rage from miles away. But it wasn't about the money, it was about pride. Blake needed to feel in control, and I had just pulled the rug out from under him silently. 2 days after the notice, Lauren called. First time since that night, I let it go to voicemail. "Mom, I don't know if you heard, but something weird's going on. Our rent just shot up a lot. Blake's losing it. I don't know, can we talk?" I didn't respond. This wasn't vengeance. This was gravity. They needed to feel the weight of their choices. I drove by the building one late night. Their lights were on, shadows moving behind the curtains, Lauren pacing, Blake yelling. I watched for a minute, then drove away. Part of me felt hollow, part vindicated, and part still hurt like hell. Because even now, knowing what I knew, holding what I held, I would have given anything to be invited back, not to the apartment, but to my daughter's heart. But that wasn't possible, at least not yet. So I stayed silent and I waited, because sometimes the loudest justice is the one that doesn't say a word, and I wasn't finished yet. I didn't realize how much I had changed until I saw Lauren at the grocery store 3 weeks after the rent increase. She didn't see me. I was 2 aisles over, hidden behind discounted cereal. She looked tired, worn down, her hair tied back sloppily, the way she used to when she'd been crying. Her cart was half empty, cheap staples, rice, eggs, off-brand cans. She paused in front of a small box of mac and cheese, looked at her phone, shoulders sank, put it back. That moment broke me, not because I pitied her, but because I remembered the little girl who used to run to me crying over a scraped knee, who asked me every night to check for monsters under the bed. And now she was living with one. I drove home that day, sat on the couch in silence for hours, staring out the window. Life had twisted us into strangers, but I reminded myself this wasn't punishment, this was consequence. And consequence was long overdue. I had plans now, not just the building, but a quiet, slow chess match. Every move calculated, every step thoughtful. With the LLC in place and the property transferred, I started small repairs. Leaks, broken locks, flickering lights. Blake never noticed. He was too busy yelling at the property manager by email, demanding answers. I knew his ego. He wasn't going to move, he'd see that as defeat. And Lauren, she'd follow his lead as she always did, so I kept going. New signage, security cameras in the lobby, updated mailboxes, all under SL Holdings, short for Susan Lynn. No one knew who was behind it. Then came the notice, annual inspections mandatory. Blake sent a furious response through the tenant portal, empty threats, self-righteous indignation. I smiled reading it. He was unraveling and I didn't have to lift a finger. Meanwhile, I was becoming someone I barely recognized. Sharper clothes, purpose in my walk. I started joining small business meetups under a pseudonym, learning real estate, building connections. No one asked about my past. They only saw a quiet, composed woman with sharp eyes and cash on hand. The best disguise is the truth you don't say. One morning, I passed Lauren and Blake in the parking lot, exiting a tenant meeting. Sunglasses on, hair in a sleek bun, documents in hand. Lauren barely glanced at me. Blake didn't recognize me at all. Later that night, sipping tea in my living room, I thought about how strange it felt to walk right past your own child and be invisible, not because you're weak, but because you're stronger than they remember. They couldn't see me now because they only knew the version of me they used to control, and that woman was gone. The calls from Lauren continued, soft, hesitant voicemails. "Hi Mom, just wanted to see if maybe you had time to talk. I know things have been complicated. I didn't return them, not out of cruelty, but because I needed her to feel the void she created." And every time doubt crept in, I opened my mother's diary. I read those words over and over. Susan will never know, she must never know, but I did know now. And with that knowledge came armor no one could tear through. I was no longer the woman begging to stay under their roof. I was the woman who owned it. I always believed revenge wasn't about getting even, it was about balance. Justice without fire, a correction, not a war. But when I saw Blake's email after the rent increase, I'll admit a small flicker of satisfaction lit inside me. Subject: rent increase. This is absolutely unacceptable. This must be a mistake. Tripping our rent. That's extortion. I demand to speak to whoever owns this dump. We've lived here 3 years, never late once. This is robbery. Signed, Blake Thompson, like his name meant something. I read it 3 times, then forwarded it to the property manager with a simple note: please respond using standard clause C regarding market rate adjustments. No special exceptions. Blake wasn't just angry, he was stunned. His arrogance never left room for the idea that someone could outmaneuver him. He'd grown so used to control that answering to a faceless landlord drove him mad. Lauren called again that same night. The voicemail was different, no pretense. "Mom, I know you're not picking up, but I really need to talk to you. Things are rough right now." Blake's upset. He's taking it out on everything. We're trying to figure things out. I miss you, I do. Her voice cracked at the end. For a moment, my fingers hovered over the screen. I could call back, tell her it would be okay, that I'd fix everything. But I didn't, because it wasn't okay, and I couldn't keep fixing messes she helped make. Lauren had let him throw me out like I was nothing more than a bill they couldn't afford. And now that the pressure was on her, she remembered how to dial my number. No, let her sit with the silence a little longer. The next week I authorized more upgrades, new paint, hallway lighting, landscaping. Blake's rent wasn't just punishment, it was funding improvements for everyone else. That was the irony. Everyone benefited, he just couldn't see it. He started leaving angry notes under the office door. "Water pressure sucks, trash piling up, if this is what we're paying for, it's a joke." Every note went unanswered. Lauren stopped leaving messages, started texting instead, short ones. "Hey, can we talk? I really need you." Then silence again. Meanwhile, the bank statements rolled in. SL Holdings was stable, profitable, even. Other tenants quiet, respectful, paid on time. It was only Blake making noise and Lauren caught in the storm. But things changed when I got the quarterly report. Attached photos of their unit, mildew in the bathroom, cracked kitchen tiles, mail stacked on the floor. They were cutting corners, living lean. I should have felt pity. Instead, I felt clarity. This wasn't just about rent, it was about power, and Blake was losing it fast. Word around the building he'd taken extra hours at work. Lauren seen crying on the back steps one afternoon. They were unraveling from the inside out, and I didn't have to say a single word. That was what I kept coming back to. For so long, I was the one begging to be heard, begging Lauren to see what Blake was, to see what she was becoming by standing beside him. Now they were choking on their own silence, and I was watching from above, literally. My new apartment overlooked their courtyard, different building, higher floor, safer neighborhood, a view they could never afford. I didn't watch all the time, just enough to remember I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the betrayal, that what they did deserved consequences. And yet, some nights I still sat by the window, holding my phone, staring at Lauren's last message. "I really need you," the mother in me ached, but the woman I'd become, she knew this was only the beginning. I always thought heartbreak came in loud moments, slamming doors, shouted words, public scenes. But real heartbreak, it's quiet. It comes in voicemails you don't return, messages left unread, the silence between you and someone who once called you mommy. The calls from Lauren stopped. The text slowed, but the damage on their end only grew. From what I heard through building staff, tension had turned to open hostility. Blake snapping at everyone, refusing maintenance, demanding unnecessary inspections, looking for someone to blame. Lauren looked like she hadn't slept in days. I didn't rejoice. I didn't celebrate. This wasn't about watching them suffer. It was something more painful, watching the daughter I raised willingly stay in a cage and call it love. One afternoon, the property manager sent a report after a noise complaint. Neighbor downstairs heard shouting, "Losing control, this is all your fault." Blake stormed out, didn't return till morning. Lauren stayed locked inside, lights off, curtains closed. I waited, not for Blake, for her. It took 2 more days, 2 long, aching days. Then, just as the sun was dipping behind the trees, my building intercom buzzed. "Hi, this is Lauren Thompson. I was wondering if my mom lives here." My heart stopped. I watched the screen frozen, then slowly pressed the door release. 10 minutes later, a soft knock. I opened the door. She stood there, looking like a shadow of the girl I raised. Pale makeup, smudged, wrinkles in her shirt. She looked 20 years older than she was. We stared at each other a long time, neither speaking. Finally, she let out a breath. "Hi, Mom." I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed. The room was silent except the clink of teacups as I prepared 2 mugs. I didn't ask why she was there. I didn't ask how she was. I just handed her the tea, sat across from her, and waited. "I don't know where to start," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I said nothing. She looked down. He's not easy. He's angry all the time, blames the rent, blames me, blames the dog next door, for God's sake. Still, I stayed silent. "I thought I was doing the right thing back then when we asked you to leave." She paused, a voice shaking. "I just wanted to keep the peace. I didn't want more conflict." Blake said, "He said you'd never leave unless we pushed you, and I hate myself for agreeing." I took a sip of tea. "I miss you," she whispered. "But I don't know how to fix it." I studied her face, every line, every flinch. She was looking for forgiveness, afraid to ask for it, so I gave her the only thing I could: silence, because sometimes silence is safer than the truth. We sat like that for nearly an hour. She didn't ask for money, didn't ask for help. She just wanted to be near me, and I let her. When she finally stood to leave, she reached for my hand. "I'm sorry for everything." I didn't say it back. I just held her hand a little longer than she expected. She pulled away first, tears welling, and walked out. I didn't cry. But the second the door clicked shut, I sank into my chair, holding the warmth of her teacup like a lifeline. She had come. She had looked me in the eye, and now I knew the cracks were finally starting to show. The thing about real power is you never have to raise your voice to use it. You don't slam doors, you don't shout threats. You just pull a string here, close a door there, and watch the ones who underestimated you start to squirm. And Blake, he was squirming. After Lauren's visit, things grew darker in that apartment. You can feel a house unraveling if you listen closely enough. The maintenance team told me Blake had become unhinged, storming the management office twice a week, demanding to know who owned the building. He wanted a name, a face, someone to blame. The fact that he didn't have one that made him spiral. He started digging. I knew he would. Blake wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. I'd seen how he used to search Lauren's phone when she took too long at the store, check her receipts, comment on how long errands took. Possessive didn't even begin to cover it. So when he started poking around for the name behind SL Holdings, I was ready. He tried looking up the LLC, standard stuff, but everything was filed through a privacy trust. No names, no leads. Then phishing emails to the property manager pretending to be a tenant, sloppy, desperate. He even called the title office pretending to be a lawyer. The clerk flagged it, reported it straight to us. When those failed, he turned inward. One neighbor called the office, asked if someone could check on the Thompsons. She'd heard glass breaking, raised voices, the kind of anger that doesn't come from bills, it comes from fear. The maintenance man went up, no answer, but through the door he could hear Blake pacing, muttering, Lauren crying. The silence afterward was heavier than the yelling. A few days later, a strange envelope arrived. No return address. Inside, a note: "I know what you're doing. You think you're clever, but you don't scare me. I'll find out who you are, and when I do, you'll regret it." No signature, but I recognized the handwriting. Blake wrote like he spoke, angry, uneven, pressing too hard on the paper. I sat there with the letter, heart thumping, not from fear, from memory. It took me back to that moment in the kitchen when he looked me in the eye like I was dirt beneath his feet, and Lauren stood beside him, not just silent, complicit. And now he was the one grasping at shadows, choking on uncertainty, screaming into the void. It was poetic, but it was also dangerous. So I doubled down, had my lawyer contact building security, installed more surveillance, discreet legal routine. I made sure the other tenants were protected. The building wasn't going to fall apart because one man couldn't handle the weight of his own cruelty. And Lauren, she didn't call again. But I heard from the building manager she'd been walking to work, cars sold, utilities cut back, lights off by 9, no heat some nights. The cracks weren't just in their relationship, they were in their survival. And yet, I kept my distance. Because this wasn't revenge, it was resolution. Letting Blake's world shrink until he realized how small he really was, and letting Lauren decide would she stay in the cage or find the key I'd placed right in front of her. I knew she wasn't ready yet, but the walls were closing in and secrets have a way of leaking through cracks. I didn't expect the knock that night. It had been quiet for days, no emails, no voicemails, no more threats. Just silence, the kind that feels like a storm waiting. But when the knock came, soft, slow, something in my chest tightened. I opened the door. Lauren stood there, soaked from the rain, grocery bag clutched to her chest like it was holding her upright. Her eyes red, mouth open, but no words came out. She looked like she'd run out of words days ago. I stepped aside. She walked in, dripping on the hardwood. I handed her a towel. We moved without speaking. I warmed the kettle, poured 2 mugs of chamomile tea. She sat on the edge of the couch like she didn't want to stay long, like she didn't deserve to. She stared into her cup, eyes hollow. "He's not who I thought he was," she said finally. I stayed quiet. I knew, part of me always knew, but I told myself it was stress, that he just needed support, that if I was patient he'd come around. Still, I said nothing. She looked up, voice trembling. "He thinks someone's targeting us. He's obsessed, going through my phone, my emails. Last week he followed me to work, said he was making sure I wasn't involved." A shiver ran through her, not from the cold. "He asked if I was hiding something, if you were hiding something." That caught my breath. She didn't wait for an answer. "I told him I hadn't spoken to you in weeks, that I didn't even know where you were." She paused. "But that was a lie." I met her eyes for the first time. "I found your building listed in a security notice, same management company. I figured it out. It wasn't hard." Of course it wasn't. Lauren was smart, always had been. But smart doesn't always mean brave. And now she looked like someone who'd finally opened her eyes and hated what she saw. "I didn't speak," I said softly. "Not yet," she whispered. "I miss you, but I don't even know how to be around you anymore." My hand tightened around the mug. "You left," she said, voice cracking. "And I let him push you out." Finally I spoke. "No, Lauren, you didn't let him, you stood with him." That stopped her cold. She blinked, lips parted like she wanted to deny it, defend herself, but there was nothing left to defend. I stood, walked to the window, stared out into the night. "I begged for your voice that night," I said quietly. "Just one word, just one, and you stayed silent." Behind me, I heard her exhale, a quiet, broken sound. "I didn't think it would get this bad," she said. "I thought I could manage him." "You can't manage a man like that," I said softly. "You survive him or you leave him." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. We sat in silence a long time, 2 women who shared blood but not trust, not yet. When she finally stood to leave, she set the mug down carefully, eyes rimmed with unshed tears. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I just needed to remember what it felt like to be safe." I walked her to the door. She paused, then suddenly turned, wrapped her arms around me. I didn't return the hug at first, then I did, gently, cautiously, like holding a memory without letting it slip away. When she pulled back, she didn't say goodbye. She just looked at me one last time and left. As the door closed, I felt something shift deep in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the faintest flicker of something that might one day grow into it if she let it. The invitation went out on a Tuesday morning, quiet, professional, no fanfare. Tenant meeting to discuss upcoming renovations, common room, following week mandatory attendance, questions welcome. I knew Blake would be there. He wouldn't be able to resist. He wanted a name, a face, someone to point at. He had no idea he'd be walking right into the hands of the woman he discarded like trash. The day of the meeting, I arrived early. Charcoal gray blazer, dark jeans, simple, elegant, unrecognizable. My hair in soft waves, nothing like the woman who once begged for dignity at Lauren's kitchen table. The room filled slowly, tenants trickling in, some curious, others annoyed. Then Blake stormed in, swagger of a man expecting confrontation, Lauren trailing behind like a shadow. He didn't look around, didn't notice me. He went straight to the property manager. "Where is she? I want to speak to the person in charge of today." The manager stayed calm. "All questions will be addressed during the presentation." Blake scoffed. Lauren looked down at her shoes. I sat near the back, silent. The presentation began. Routine announcements, upgrades, timelines, new security, landscaping, insulation. All practical, smart, funded in part by the very rent Blake had protested. Then the manager paused. "We'd like to thank SL Holdings for their commitment to revitalizing the property and prioritizing tenant comfort. The owner is here today should anyone have questions." I stood. The room turned. I walked slowly to the front, calm, steady, every step a quiet heartbeat. Blake's face twisted, confusion, then disbelief. Lauren's mouth parted in shock. I turned to the room. "Good evening, my name is Susan. I'm the owner of this building." You could hear a pin drop. Blake stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. This is a joke. What kind of game is this?" I looked at him, really looked, and saw the cracks he'd tried to hide, sweat behind his collar, puffiness under his eyes, panic. "No game," I said softly, "just business." He took a step forward. "You manipulated this. You've been behind this the whole time. You raised our rent. You're trying to ruin us." I held my ground. "I gave you a roof. I made improvements. I treated every tenant equally. What I didn't do was forget." He opened his mouth, but I turned back to the group. "If anyone has questions about the changes, I'm happy to answer after the meeting." "Thank you." I stepped aside. The meeting resumed, but the tension never left the air. Blake didn't sit, just stood trembling, furious. Lauren sat with her hands clasped tight, eyes wide and wet. When it ended, tenants came to me, shaking hands, asking questions, thanking me. Some had suspected, most had no idea. Blake waited until the room emptied, then marched toward me. "You think you've won, but this is nothing. You've made an enemy." I looked at him, eyes level. "No, Blake, I didn't make anything. You did it the day you looked me in the eye and treated me like I didn't matter." Lauren stepped between us. "Blake, stop." He turned to her, shocked. "What did you just?" I said stop, she repeated, louder this time. "She's not your enemy, she never was, you are." He looked at her like she'd struck him, and in a way, she had. Lauren turned to me, voice trembling. "I didn't know, I swear, about the building, the money, any of it." I nodded. "I know. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you had to see it, not just hear it." She blinked back tears. Blake scoffed, stepping back. "You two deserve each other." "No," I said quietly, "she deserves better." Then I turned and walked away, and for the first time since that awful night in their kitchen, I felt something shift inside me. Not revenge, not satisfaction, but power. Quiet, firm, entirely mine. Lauren showed up at my door again 4 days later, this time holding something that made my knees buckle. A book, faded leather, corner torn, spine barely holding, my mother's diary. I opened the door without a word. She stepped in, eyes wide, breath shaky. "I found it in my closet," she said. "The last time I visited you, you must have left it behind." She placed it on the coffee table like it was sacred, and for me it was. I read it. My heart stopped. I wasn't trying to pry, she rushed, but I recognized the handwriting. I was looking for something that made sense. Silence fell heavy. "I didn't know about Richard Paul Donovan or the money, the trust, any of it." I nodded slowly. "I didn't know either, not until I had nothing else to lose." Her voice broke. "Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe you were helpless?" I looked her in the eye, and for once she didn't look away. "Because I was helpless the night you closed the door on me. I didn't have a plan, I didn't have money, I didn't even have a place to cry where someone wouldn't knock and tell me to keep it down." She winced. "I found the diary at my lowest point, counting coins for dinner, not speaking to anyone for a week. That diary didn't just tell me who I was, it reminded me that I mattered, that my mother didn't just love me, she fought for me silently without ever being able to show it." Lauren sat down, hands clenched in her lap. "I don't know how I became the kind of daughter who could do what I did. I keep asking myself that over and over." I walked to the window, stared out at the quiet street. "You didn't become her all at once," I said. "It was small choices, letting things slide, choosing peace over truth, believing love meant loyalty even when it hurt." She stood, walked toward me. "I've left him." The words hit like a bomb. He tried to go through my things again, my laptop, my bag. I told him no, that was it. He screamed, packed a bag, said he'd be back. I changed the locks the next day. I turned to her, stunned. I don't know who I am without him, she admitted, voice trembling, but I'd rather find out than keep disappearing. Silence passed between us, thick with everything unsaid. Then she looked down at the diary. You didn't deserve what I did or what we did. I can't fix that, but I want to try. I walked back, sat beside her. I used to dream about hearing those words, I said, but when you say them now, they don't fix the past. They rewrite it? She looked at me, confused. I held her hand gently. You see me now, that changes everything. We sat there together a long time, the kind of silence that doesn't hurt but heals. The kind that comes after truth has finally had its say. Before Lauren left that night, she paused at the door. You didn't raise me to be weak, she said. I just forgot how strong you were. I smiled softly. No, I said. You didn't forget, you just stopped looking. And now she was seeing everything, not just who I had become, but who I'd always been. When the email came from Blake, I almost didn't open it. Subject line alone made my stomach churn. We need to talk now. I read it slowly. I know everything about the building, the inheritance, your little secret with Donovan. You think you're clever, you think you can ruin my life and walk away smiling. Let me make something clear. If you don't undo this, I will go to the press, your name, your mother's affair, everything. Let's see how your precious reputation holds up when everyone knows what kind of family you really come from. I stared at the screen, stunned. He'd finally connected the dots, somehow through Lauren or his own digging. But I wasn't afraid. I had planned for this moment since the day I bought the building. I forwarded the email to my attorney. By the next morning, Blake received a cease and desist. Records of every threatening message, falsified documents, tampered emails traced to his IP, tenant complaints, maintenance sabotage logs, audio clips of his rants. We didn't need criminal charges. One defamation and harassment suit was enough. He panicked. Lauren called me 2 days later, voice shaking. He's gone, packed up while I was at work, left a note saying he was being hunted, said you ruined his life. He ruined his own, I said quietly. She was silent. Then, I'm sorry again, forever thinking he deserved my silence. You were scared, I replied. I've been there. Fear makes you small, but you don't have to stay that way. It wasn't long before Blake tried to retaliate, vague rants on social media implying corruption, betrayal. He never named names. He couldn't afford to, not after the second letter threatened legal action for every word. He went quiet after that, publicly at least. Privately, I knew he'd never forget the day he realized the woman he kicked out with 2 suitcases now owned the roof over his head, the lease under his name, the keys to every door he once slammed in mine. Lauren, on the other hand, who was transforming. She moved out within a month, found a small studio near her job, started therapy, joined an art class. She even painted something for me, an abstract phoenix in dark reds and golds. I hung it above my fireplace. We talked more often, not every day, but when we did, it was real, honest, no more pretending. The last piece came in an envelope from Mr. Morrison. Congratulations, Susan. The building has been fully transferred, final tenants signed new agreements, the lawsuit against Mr. Thompson resolved in your favor. You are now free to sell, hold, or restructure as you see fit. I folded the letter, held it to my chest. This wasn't just about money, property, revenge. This was about truth, about reclaiming my name, my story, my strength. The next morning, I called a realtor. I was ready to close the last chapter and open the door to a life I no longer had to survive. I could finally live it on my terms. I sold the building in late spring. Final paperwork signed on a bright, cloudless Tuesday. No fanfare, just a quiet click of a pen, a firm handshake, and the weight of 3 years of grief, betrayal, silence finally lifting off my shoulders. The money was wired the next day, but I didn't celebrate. Instead, I wrote a large check. Half the proceeds went to a local shelter for women and children in crisis, the kind of place I wish I'd known existed that night on the curb. I asked them to build a wing named after my mother, the Francis House. It was my way of honoring the woman who gave me strength in silence, who hid a lifetime of secrets so I could one day discover the truth and become more than the world expected. The other half, I used to buy a small house. Nothing extravagant, just a charming 2-bedroom on the same street where I grew up in Cedar Park. Oak trees out front, a porch swing, space for quiet healing, maybe even growing tomatoes one day. The day I moved in, Lauren helped carry boxes. We didn't say much, neither of us needed to. After unpacking, she sat beside me on the porch swing, legs tucked under her, eyes scanning the street like she was trying to recognize the girl she used to be. I remember riding my bike here, she said softly, before everything got complicated. I nodded. You were always safe here. I forgot how that felt, she whispered. We didn't talk about Blake, we didn't need to. His chapter had closed without drama, just silence. He disappeared into a new city, new job, probably new lies, but not before signing a non-disclosure agreement and dropping his threats. The last thing he wanted was another legal battle, or worse, the world seeing the truth about him. He was a ghost now. Lauren stayed for dinner. We made grilled cheese and tomato soup like when she was little. She laughed when she burned one side. I laughed when she tried to blame the pan. It was the first real laughter we'd shared in years. That night, after she left, I stood at the window holding a cup of tea in both hands, watching moonlight stretch across the lawn. And for the first time in a long, long time, I said the words out loud. I forgive you, not to Lauren, to myself, because that was the hardest part, not rising from the ashes, but learning I was never the fire they tried to extinguish. I was the spark they underestimated. They taught me silence was weakness. I learned how to weaponize it. They tried to erase me, and I became someone they could never forget. I sat down on the couch, opened the diary one last time, and tucked a note inside for Lauren to find someday. You don't need their love to be worthy. You don't need their approval to be strong. You only need the truth and to never, ever forget who you are. The clock ticked softly. My tea grew cold, but my heart, it was finally warm. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to win. I just needed to be who I was all along. And now, finally, I was home. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.